Kimaras. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second Covey Law Thomas Office Hour webinar. This is a monthly series, and each session is focused on one broad and timely topic related to U.S. immigration issues, with an emphasis on the cultural sector. My name is Matthew Covey. I'm the executive director of Thomas and a partner at Covey Law. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a middle-aged white man with short hair and a beard and mustache and no glasses right now. Immigration is a complex topic, and we can't hope to provide comprehensive coverage of our topic today. So here's this disclaimer. The information we provide today should not be taken as legal advice, which can only be given in regard to the circumstances of a specific case, obviously. We will be giving the best information we have right now, and you should feel invited to reach out to us if you have specific questions that we haven't answered, or if you're making important decisions based on what you're hearing today. Also, if you're watching this video after November 12th, 2025, some information could be outdated by the time you hear it. So again, please reach out to us for updates. If you're a Covey Law client, reach out to your attorney or case manager, and if not, contact Thomas.'s pro bono hotline, Thomas.avail, through the link at thomas.org/Thomas.avail. Today's office hours is meant for transgender, gender nonconforming, or intersex artists and their allies. We will be discussing the unique challenges that TGNCI plus community faces when applying for O and P visas and when entering the US. Joining us today are two Covey Law attorneys, Lee Clark and Will Spitz. Lee is a senior associate at Covey Law, where he principally works O and P visas for performing artists who are coming to the U.S. He provides pro bono counsel to the international cultural community through Thomas Avail service. And prior to working at Covey Law, Lee practiced eviction prevention work, representing tenants in eviction proceedings and representing clients in the Human Trafficking Intervention Court in New York City. Will Spitz is a partner at Covey Law, where he leads Covey Law's Performing Arts Division, focusing primarily on O&P visas for artists entering the U.S. He also provides pro bono legal services for foreign artists and arts professionals as a volunteer for Thomas. Through the session, please feel free to put your questions or comments into the chat. I will be monitoring it. The panelists will not be able to see the chat. So I'll be trying to pick out key questions, and I'll be posing them along the way or holding them for the Q&A at the end. So that's my intro. Thank you all for coming. It's really great to see a room full of people interested in this topic and concerned about the important issues that Lee and Will be talking about today. So Lee and Will, take it away.
Thanks, Matthew. My name is Will Spitz. I am a white middle-aged man with clear glasses, short brown hair, and a sort of little bit of a beard going on. Lee, do you want to say hello to everybody, and then we can take it from there?
Yeah, totally. Hi, I'm Lee. My pronouns are he, him. I am a white trans person, short brown hair. I'd like to think a nice mustache, and a tan vest and gray shirt.
Great. Lee, to start, can you tell us a little bit, sorry, to start, can you quickly explain who we're talking about when we say TGNCI plus artists?
Totally. So we are going to specifically be kind of talking about the transgender nonconforming intersex lightly community, and navigating the mostly specifically O&P petition and visa process as a trans person, in regards to gender markers, kind of specifically, and the interview process.
Great, thanks. So, since the beginning of this new administration, we are seeing news that makes the idea of touring in the US sound potentially risky for trans artists. What do trans artists need to know to make an informed decision about whether or not to tour in the US right now?
Yeah, so great question. My dog is barging in, so apologies if she starts barking.
I
But
chicken.
but yeah, I think that there are lots of decisions to be made when any person determines they want to go through a government visa process in the US. I do think that there are specific concerns for the trans community right now, as there is a much heightened level of surveillance and attention on the trans community. The things that I would specifically point out are whether one is comfortable outing themselves to the government, whether one is comfortable having a visa with an incorrect gender marker uh, printed on it by the government, also like unknowingly. Like we've had some clients who have just been like, oh, my visa says a different gender than what I applied with. Um, Conversation about your gender with a government official is another concern. Um, but yeah, they at the same time, I think there's a spectrum of, I don't want to say tactics, but tactics of how to approach government forms and the new policies that are out, and definitely a lot of conversation about disclosure and what you feel comfortable disclosing and not disclosing.
Yeah. So to take a step back, I think it's important to talk about why this is even an issue in the first place, beyond just, the sort of anti-trans rhetoric of the administration. Early in Trump's second term, he signed an executive order that somewhat ridiculously is called Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Basically, the order says that declares that there are two sexes and they are unchangeable. So if you were assigned male at birth, you are male forever, and that can't be changed. Same goes for female. And so when a president issues an order like that, then all of the various federal agencies need to adjust their policies to align with what that order says. And so the various federal immigration agencies, USCIS and the US State Department principally, had to interpret that order and adjust their policies accordingly. And so the way they did so is basically on visa petitions and visa applications, they are directing people to indicate the sex that they were assigned at birth, regardless of what their actual gender is, regardless of what their passport says. Their guidance, their instructions on these government forms are indicate your sex at birth. And so, um, I think, and we'll talk about this as we go through these questions, but I think that leaves trans people in a difficult situation in deciding, well, are they how am I going to answer this question? I am not male. Am I going to say I'm female because that's what my birth certificate says? My passport says male. What am I doing here? So we'll get to specific examples and advice as we go. Um, so it's clearly that the federal government is targeting trans, non-binary, and intersex individuals, as that order makes very clear, and their rhetoric throughout the campaign and throughout this administration. Are these artists less likely to be approved for visas right now? And what are the chances that they'll be hassled at the border?
Okay. Um, so let's start with the first part, which is, are trans people less likely to be approved for artist visas right now? And simply just no. We are not seeing an uptick in denials of visas for trans artists. We are not seeing petition denials solely based on this or even mentioning this. Nor are we seeing it for visas. Um, and just to like kind of stretch that out a bit more, petitions are adjudicated with USCIS, and then visas are issued through usually a consulate's office at Department of State. So it
So those
is,
are two steps
yeah.
in a for everyone except Canadian citizens. Getting a artist visa is a two-step process. The first part happens with USCIS. That part is called filing a petition. And then the second step is after that petition has been approved, you apply for a visa at a US embassy or consulate outside the US. So just to have a baseline of what we're talking about.
Yes, but in both areas, we are not seeing denials because someone is trans. Um, I also think, not to get like too into the weeds of this, but it feels important to also note that the policy regarding gender varies a touch between those two agencies, and USCIS kind of explicitly says that they will not deny a petition based on based on an indication of sex. Gender is not a word that's really used throughout these policies. It is strictly sex. Um, it is kind of important to also note we have seen slight delays, but those delays have either been resolved in the end or not like months upon months, because that is a possibility as well, but we just have not seen it yet, which is good. It's messy, but it is good.
Totally. I want to ask you a question that I know the answer to, but for the petition process first, and then I want to talk about the visa
Yeah.
application process. Have we had clients answer the trans clients specifically answer the sex question on the petition with the sex that they were assigned at birth, regardless of what their passport says? And have we had the inverse happen where they're sort of disregarding the instructions, the petition instructions that say indicate that's the sex that you were assigned at birth and saying their true gender identity? Are we seeing both of those, and have we seen problems with either of those approaches?
Yeah, so I think there are problems throughout all the approaches, whether the problem becomes personal, whether the problem is government. I mean, you're always making a pretty informed decision about what risks you're willing to take, what risks you're not willing to take. And that is so individual. Like, to be clear, we are not here to say which approach is best. You have to make that decision. Happy to hold further conversations with you about that decision, but it is definitely a spectrum of what feels good for you. Now, we have seen people correctly identify their gender on a petition that does not match their birth certificate assigned at birth. And there have been different outcomes. One of the outcomes was there's no problem at all. The visa process went through without a delay. Nothing came up regarding a person's gender throughout that process. Um, and on the other hand, we have seen that same approach where the visa is issued with a differing gender. So I apply with my correct gender, male, on the petition. I also identify male um uh and the DS-160. And then I go to my interview. The consulate officer says, I'm suspicious because of what I see in the database or past visas or press that I have come upon when I Google your name. Can you show me your birth certificate? And at that point, we have had applicants experience delays. And in the end, a visa that does not match with their present gender. Um, to keep it going a touch more, when entering the US with a visa that has a sex that differs from your passport, we have not seen people get hassled entering with differing documents, if that is making sense. If Will, can you let me know if that sounds like I'm explaining it correctly?
I'm sorry, I was frozen for a second there, so I missed exactly what you said, but I think the basic gist is that we've had artists whose passport says
Yeah.
their true gender and their visa lists a different sex, the sex that they were assigned at birth. So there's a mismatch between the sex markers on their passport and visa. And in the early days of this, we were really worried about that type of situation. And so far, um, we've had multiple artists in that situation enter the US and have no problems at all. I mean, that doesn't mean, it's a relatively small sample size that we're dealing with, and things could change. There could be individual officers who feel emboldened to embarrass someone or worse. But so far, we're not hearing any negative stories, which is pleasantly surprising, I suppose. And so, just to be clear, to sort of summarize, Lee, what you're saying is we've had clients, artist clients, who have we've sort of done every permutation of this, like clients who were willing to just say, whatever they want me to say. I was male, that I'm male because that's the sex I was assigned at birth. That's what it says on my birth certificate. Fine, I'll do that. And those folks have been fine. Fine. When I say fine, I mean visa approved. I don't want to say fine because none of this is fine. Um, and we've also had the other situation where people have gone with their true gender, which does not match the sex that they were assigned at birth. And those folks have also gotten visas and been able to enter the US. And we've been explicit about it in certain cases where we have said, especially in cases where being trans is a big part of the artist's story. So you Google, an artist who's very well known and they're very out and it's not a secret. And so in certain situations, we've indicated on the government form, like this person is transgender, they are female. They're that she is female. So we're indicating that she is female. She was assigned male at birth. Um, and that has not so far. I mean, only I can only think of two cases off the top of my head where we've done that, but so far those have been okay. Um, and again, okay meaning visas were approved, and
A very relative okay. I
yeah,
think a lot of this conversation is trying to take the temperature down a touch, where there's a lot of conversation in the press, in communities, where it is a very, very scary thing to go through this process as a trans person. And I do not want to belittle those fears at all. Like, it is scary. It's very, very, like, stressful, like, simple as that. But just letting everyone know it is a possibility. There is a there are various ways to approach how to do this, and we're very much here to have that conversation with you.
yeah,
So, like, yeah, fine is pretty relative. Like, it that feels important to note, that like it is still government surveillance and violence and really hard to navigate. But if you simply want the document that says that you can come to the US and work as an artist, it is very, very likely that we will be able to help you.
great, thanks. Um, Matthew, you look like you have something to say. No, okay. Lee, for those of us who work to support the careers of trans and other gender diverse artists, what does allyship look like right now? I'm asking for a friend.
I mean, I think it's like what we are just talking about. Like, I want to again kind of say, like, this is very stressful. This is very stressful for the trans community. I do not have to apply for a visa, but I work with people who do all of the time, including majority cis people, which it's already stressful. Like, I think if you're a manager, if you're an agent, if you're a venue, if you are anyone a part of this process with an artist who is trans that is navigating this right now, undue pressure is not going to help. Like, it's time for you to kind of sit, listen. If you are the person getting the contracts, if you are the person seeking signatures, yeah, I mean, that's helpful. That's helpful for anyone. Like, do that on a timely basis. It's like those are things that I would tell any person at all. Like, what allyship looks like is don't pressure a trans artist to go through anything they don't want to go through right now. Go through the petition process quickly if they do want to. Like, it's like kind of simply boring. And I think that it sometimes is allowed to be boring. Like, you need to listen to the person who's telling you, I'm not feeling great about this, I don't want to do this, and go with that decision. Or, hey, I have this like long checklist of really tedious things to do. Can you help me? Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, I just wanted to toss in there that a conversation that the three of us have had on a couple of occasions is that the way an artist in this situation might respond varies greatly. We've certainly had clients who've said, if there is any chance of something going wrong, there's no way the $400 guarantee for the show I'm doing in Boston is worth that stress. I'm not going to do this. And that's fine. That's a totally reasonable response. We've also had people who've said, there is no time in my career or place in my career when my voice is more important than it is in the US right now. Nothing's going to keep me out of the US. And that's also a completely reasonable response. And I think as arts support organizations, whether it's an agent or a manager or a venue or an institution or a union or whatever it might be, recognizing that it's not our place to make those kinds of decisions. Our place is to make sure that the artist has the best information, which is why everyone is here, presumably right now, has the best information to make the best decision, which works for them, for their artistic vision and for um, their personal position on sort of risk assessment or their mission. That's all.
Hmm.
Just wanted to toss that in there.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a specific case. I mean, for me, as a progressive American fan of international, you know, artistic cultural exchange, international music, um, my inclination is to be like, let's bring every single trans artist we can here. Let bring them to Florida. Like, let's do this. Like, it's gonna be okay. Like, we know how to do it. Um, and I have to remind myself that like I'm not the one who has to, we had a conversation with an artist, a trans artist who is, I don't think, out. And we had to tell her, like, look, there's a chance that the government is going to ask for a copy of your birth certificate. Um, and that was really upsetting to her to think about going, she was like, my birth certificate is buried in my mom's attic. I never want to see it again. Um, and it was really powerful. And it was a reminder to me as an ally. It's not my place to pressure, like you were saying, Lee, like to be like, yeah, just do it. It's gonna be great. I'm trying to do a lot more listening and stepping back than I'm used to in this situation for sure. All right, let's move on. unless Lee or Matthew, you have anything else to add to that. Okay,
No, I think that was a nice way to summarize it.
great. So many artists use their platform to advocate for political change. This is a question we're getting a lot from, not just trans and gender diverse people right now, from all artists, from everyone who's seeking to come to the U.S. as a non-citizen. For artists that choose to tour in the US, what can get an artist into trouble? How much trouble are we talking about? What can artists do to minimize their risk exposure? Do I have to scrub my social media of every political statement I've ever made? Should I be bringing a burner phone? What are the risks? And what can and should people be doing?
Mm-hmm. Um, I I struggle with this question. I have a tough time with this question. I do think that there are some facts that might be helpful, or patterns that might be helpful that we've seen. Facts might be a little too confident. Um, some patterns that we are seeing is that the people that are most likely to be targeted right now for political voice, action, change, advocacy are students, which is upsetting, but different from the artist, different from one entering the US on an O or a P visa. Um, I also think it's important to note that the government has always been able to access your phone. This isn't a new thing in the current administration. Um,
Or at least ask for access to your phone. You can say
yep,
no, but then you're probably not getting in.
you are highly likely not getting in. Um, I also, at the same time, some patterns is that we have not seen an uptick here in our clients. And I would say it's a pretty high volume that we are able to kind of track. Um, I haven't had a client had their phone searched. This doesn't mean that anything could change at any point, but it's hard navigating this question because the possibility is on the table. It's just such a low possibility. I think at the same time, while political voice is really important, there is a line that feels a little distinct of when it's crossed, the likelihood of you being scrutinized, questioned, or like in trouble is much higher, which is inciting violence in any way or threatening to incite violence. Something I know that's a pretty broad thing to say, but I think it's maybe a good idea to look at it as a pretty broad definition of what that could be. Again, I struggle with this question because it's unlikely that your phone is going to be scrubbed. Searched. I don't want to say you have to scrub your social media. And like there is a slight possibility of it being on the table.
Yeah, and that's always been the case though, right? Or at least as long as I've been doing this work is, there's a tremendous amount of discretion on the part of individual customs officers to hassle someone, to ask to see their phone, to Google them, to look at their public statements, to deny entry for any reason or no reason at all. That was true, when I started here, Obama was president, and it happened periodically. There wasn't a significant pattern, and I don't think that's changed much now. At least when it comes to artists, with there are notable exceptions. I'm thinking about the kneecaps and the Bob Villans of the world, but those are sort of outlier situations. Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind there are hundreds of thousands of non-US citizens entering the US every single day. We're
Yeah.
hearing about if there is a problem, it's being reported in the news. So the vast, vast majority of people are fine. Even the ones, we have plenty of clients who have been outspoken, for example, in their support of Palestine, who have been, vocal about their disdain for President Trump. Um, on the other hand, there's been recent stories of comedians getting their visas revoked because they, I'm not exactly sure of the exact content of their posts, but were apparently celebrating the killing of Charlie Kirk. That was a focus of the administration for a little while there. Matthew, you have something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in there. Well, first of all, there's a question from the attend for the folks from the folks at home. Can you explain what accessing your phone entails? I think when we first brought up that topic, it sounded when we say they could always access your phone, it was sort of sounded like at any time they can get into your phone. And that wasn't what we meant. What you meant was they can always at a border, they can always ask to see your phone and you can allow them to or not. But if you don't allow them to, that might be reason for them not to allow you in. And if you allow them to, they can dig through it. I also think it's important to say that you mentioned the kneecaps and the Bob Villans of the world, and that those are kind of outliers. I do think that the primary focus we're seeing in at Customs and Border Protection, meaning at the borders for enforcement, really relates to what is perceived as security threats for the U.S. So we have seen very limited situations with artists who for fairly obvious reasons, meaning their nationality, might already be suspect when they arrive. If they're traveling on a Palestinian passport, if they're traveling on a Syrian passport, it is fair to assume that they may be seeing significantly more scrutiny. And then if and we have seen situations where they have gone through those phones, and if they have found stuff, whether it's photos or social media, which in the eyes of a Customs and Border Protection officer aligns them with potential terrorism, um, then yeah, we've seen denials of entry to the U.S. in situations like that. But again, this is both. I mean, depending on where you're from and what your passport is, this is either a very possible thing or highly unlikely. If you are an indie rock band from Edinburgh and you've been putting social stuff on Instagram about what you think of Donald Trump, there's a highly unlikely that you're going to get pulled aside and have a CBP officer go through your phone and deny you entry to
Mhm.
the US. If you are a Syrian playwright, there's a pretty high chance that they may pull you aside. And if they find something that seems to their minds fishy in your photos or in your social media, you are probably not getting into the US. The other question that we had here is, I'm just going to quote this, just checking that I've got the appropriate takeaway. Is it accurate that a trans artist can put their true current gender on the I-129, and there's a decent chance that it won't cause an issue with getting the petition approved? And is it possible that they can get through their consular interview and get a visa issued with their true gender on it? The answer is yes.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. I'm not saying that it won't come up in the consular process. It has, where there's no indication and the consular officer has done research and um a some sort of flag has been indicated where they seek more information, but I definitely think it's a possibility.
Yeah, um, the most likely worst case scenario, I think, in that situation, um, is they ask for a copy of your birth certificate and then they sit on your application for 2 months while they whatever they do. And then I mean, we've seen this multiple times where they ask for the birth certificate, there's a delay, and then the person is issued a visa with that doesn't match their passport that says the sex as it's indicated on their birth certificate. So I think if you are planning on going that route, um, leave as much time as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think that's the most important thing. Again, we haven't seen. Again, I want to the caveat is always like this could change at any moment. It's right now it's November 12th. I don't know what it's going to be like on November 13th. November 12th, 2025. I can't believe we have 3 more years of this. But yeah, so the caveat is always like this could change tomorrow, but as of right now, we haven't heard of anyone in the situation as just described be denied a petition or a visa or entry to the US.
Yeah. Um, I think Matthew and Will both uh bring up important factors that maybe have not been explicitly named, but while these policies are really difficult against trans people and transphobic, there is always a racial element. There's always a class element. Like starting early is hard to do. It's like much harder to do. And also, the likelihood that you're going to have to pay for premium processing is a bit higher because you want more time to go through the consular process. So, while like I do want to turn the temperature down, but also it like does feel important to note that they are still difficult things to navigate.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Matthew.
Yeah, another question here. Quoting, I represent as an agent two artists who are US citizens who are trans. Both are hesitant to tour in Canada for fear of being harassed or worse when returning to the US. One currently has an X on their passport and has now fully transitioned. He is choosing to change their marker to M, their gender. Have you noticed any upticks in people who have changed their gender markers more than once?
Um, no, though I will say we do not have this many conversations with people who are US citizens. A lot of our information is mostly folks who are not US citizens traveling in. I do think entering the US, like, I guess I could say more on like my friends who have X's in their passports have not had trouble re-entering the country. On a legal standpoint, I can't really give the same information, unfortunately.
Um, Sorry, I've started to look at the Q&A, but Matthew, I'll let you keep doing that.
You're not supposed to do that, Will.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not seeing, I think we've answered everybody. Well, there's a couple of questions that have been put in which are very specific. So if we're not answering your questions live in this forum, please feel free to follow up with emails either to Will and Lee at the firm or to Thomas.avail. And please always feel free to reach out to those resources. Thomas.avail is pro bono legal assistance on stuff like this. So if you go onto Thomas.'s website, you can just click on the button and it leads you to a form that you can engage with an attorney or an experienced paralegal to answer your questions about anything related to artist mobility into the US. I am not seeing any further questions coming in.
We have
So,
some that were submitted ahead of time.
okay, do you want to touch on those?
Sure. First, I just want to one final question from us before we get into the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Lee, I just want to ask you, um, just coming back to TGNCI issues, is there anything on this topic that's making you feel hopeful right now?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like we are able and trans people are able to get visas to come tour the US and bring their art to a country where the administration is like actively trying to silence them, and that rocks. And it's really, really nice to see when like sometimes it's easy to go into a spiral with a lot of the propaganda rhetoric that's happening right now. So I think that's so hopeful. I think that's so rad. It feels really nice. And I wish I wish it wasn't as like hopeful as it is. Like I just wish it was easier across the board. But no, it rocks.
Yeah, and it feels like again, easy for me to say, but it does feel like having trans artists be visible and out there right now is important in countering that propaganda. And the whole purpose of these policies is to silence communities. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I think I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful too. I think
Yeah,
it's important, and I'm grateful, Lee, to you and the work that you're doing on this topic. I mean, it's really amazing. Matthew.
sure.
Yeah. Um, Couple more questions coming in under the wire
Oh,
here.
fab.
Yeah, here we
Sure.
go. Quoting here, I work with a trans artist who has an O1 in her given birth gender, unfortunately, and looks quite different. They look quite different now from her passport photo. UK immigration recently told her she needs a new passport, but she has 2+ years left on her visa. Can she use her visa in line with a new passport? And there's a little parenthetical here says we love Lee.
I see who this is. And the feeling is mutual. Um, yeah, yeah. That's no problem. Like you're talking about someone has the visa in an older passport, they have a new passport, they bring the old passport with the unexpired visa in it and travels, that is no problem. People,
Lee, do you have any advice in terms of like bringing, say, name change documentation or that sort of thing?
yeah, that's a really good question. And I think often this in two parts, which is like that's unfair. People who are married and change their name don't have to bring name change documents. Da 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 da. Like that's unreasonable. And then on the same time, it's like, well, it can lessen the risk of you running into problems with a border officer. Like if you have the name change documents, it could be as simple as being like, look at my name change document. So it's like it's a little twofold where like if that makes you feel more comfortable to just bring a copy of your name change document, do it for sure. Is it necessary? It shouldn't be, but like we know how government works all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff right now that they're asking for that isn't strictly
Yes.
necessary, but they, you know.
Yes.
And this is one of those tough things. And this is not, again, we're not telling anyone, I'm certainly not telling anyone how to approach this, but I think when you run into something that's offensive like that, it's always good to take a beat and take a breath and be like, is this, I could do this thing which is going to make it easier. I could do this thing which could create my risks. Is this the hill I'm going to plant my flag on with this particular officer at CBP? Or am I going to get into the US the easy way so that I can make sure my voice is heard? That's a hard decision to make. Where do you plant your flag on principle? And but I do think it's worth taking a moment to consider it from that perspective. There's another question here, which is good. Are there particular barriers or things to know for trans artists from the UK or anywhere, I think, entering Austin for South by Southwest in 2026?
That's great. I think that kind of like moves us into the direction of the other submitted questions that we received previously. Um, and yeah, Will, do you wanna take that one?
Sure. Yeah, that echoes the first question actually that we have here on the list of the pre-submitted questions. The person who submitted this question specified, um, are there any issues with trans artists traveling to Austin for South by Southwest, specifically on an ESTA, so without a work visa, without an O or a P visa? And I think aside from, I mean, just everything we've already talked about should be taken into consideration. But otherwise, I don't think that there are any issues specific to trans artists that anyone needs to be aware of. I think it's always important for any artist from anywhere with any gender identity to be aware that if you are coming to play South by Southwest without a work visa, um, that there are limitations on what you can and can't do. Um, Generally speaking, doing official South by Southwest showcases without a work visa is generally okay because the government has recognized South by Southwest as a bona fide showcase event, industry showcase. Um, what they have not said is okay is doing unofficial South by shows or doing other shows or other work related activities on your way to Austin. So, we get this question all the time. I'm playing South by, I'm not getting a visa. I understand that I can do South by without a work visa. But like on my way in, I want to play I want to play Mercury Lounge in New York and whatever DC on my way driving down. I'm not getting paid for those shows. In fact, I'm losing a bunch of money. And I think the thing to always keep in mind is not getting paid doesn't necessarily doesn't necessarily mean you don't need a visa. So the reason that South by Southwest is okay is because it's viewed as this sort of the purpose of an official South by show. Sorry, I keep tripping over that. Whether or not this is really true in reality, but the primary purpose of a South by Southwest showcase is it's a showcase for industry people who are considering working with you, whether it's agents or labels or whomever. And that's the distinction that makes it okay on an ESTA or on a visitor visa. Um, yeah.
Great.
Does that answer the question? I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna continue on. There's a question, it's a two-parter. I'm gonna chop it up a little. Can you discuss the pros and cons of applying for a P1 visa versus an O1? And I know that could be a very long response, but
I'll try to keep it short. So, I mean, it's very situation specific, but generally speaking, an O1 visa is for an individual artist. So, usually a solo artist. A group cannot get an O1 visa. P1 visas are for members of groups. So, a solo artist cannot get a P1 visa. There are, exception is not really the right word, but there are sort of, I don't know. Um, a a solo artist with a backing band might be able to get a P1 visa. Similarly, a band might be able to get O visas if there's like a front person of the band or someone in the band who is or group, whatever. It doesn't necessarily need to be a band. Any sort of entertainment group that would normally get a P1, if there's an individual who might be eligible for an O1, that might be something that is a possibility and might be more cost effective. Basically, the general pro so you might not have an option, but if you do have an option, and again, it's very fact specific, the pros I think to O visas are that they can be valid for up to 3 years if you can show that there will be US work spanning those 3 years, whereas P visas have a maximum validity period of 1 year. So a lot of groups are interested in getting O's so they don't have to go through this process every 3 years, or sorry, every year. They can get a 3-year visa. It's not always an option. It sometimes is. I think that's sort of the basic pros and cons are just sort of the differing maximum validity periods.
yeah. It's a yeah. With that, I think that sometimes people see like the P visa as the easier route or the O visa as the easier route. They are just different routes.
Hmm.
The second part of this question is the second part of this question we get often, and I think it's a great question. And can you discuss USCIS criteria for emerging and young artists? Um, and what is considered to be achievements in terms of university or young artist evidence, and what qualifies as professional?
It's a really good question, and it's a tough one because I mean, I assume what we're talking about here is someone who's early in their career, who's just graduated from school, who's looking to transition to an O1 visa from like a student visa, or someone who's just early in their career and looking to sort of launch their career in the US. And that's really difficult because O1 classification requires showing that that you are renowned in your field and have sustained acclaim. That's the term that they use. And what sustained acclaim usually means is at least a year of significant professional achievements. And oftentimes, USCIS discounts achievements, no matter how impressive they are, if they were done while the person was in school. So that's really, if you're in Juilliard, you're obviously at the top of your game. And if you're killing it at Juilliard, like you would think that that would be sort of an easy, like you'd be a shoe-in for an O1 because the O1 is for people of extraordinary ability. If you're at the top of your class at Juilliard, you obviously have extraordinary ability, right? But that's not really what the O1 is about. The focus of an O1 is on achievements. And when we say achievements, they're really sort of like traditional metrics of industry success. So like press in major media, award nominations, um, record sales, sort of these antiquated ideas of what it means to be successful as an artist. That's not to say that emerging artists can't get O1 visas. We do that all the time, but there needs to be some sort of track record of professional, and when I say professional, I mean like not university, um, achievements, for lack of a better word. That we keep using the word achievements because that's what USCIS uses. But um, yeah, they really want to see that you've reached a certain point in your career um, where you have renown in your field, and that can be really tough for a young artist, for sure.
Mhm.
But if you
Uh,
have questions about whether or not you might be eligible, feel free to send them our way. Send us materials, and we're always happy to do an assessment.
yeah, totally. Okay, so the next questions are about the consular process, which, okay, I've been hearing that some consulates are requiring more documentation to prove that members will not be overstaying in the US. Um, some notes have been rental agreements, utility bills, performances outside of the US. Do you suggest that artists going to their consular interviews bring these documents?
That's a really good question. And this type of scrutiny about whether or not someone is likely to overstay their visa or illegally immigrate to the US is always heightened. And this sort of echoes what Matthew and I think Lee, you were saying earlier. It's heightened for people from from global South countries or countries that the US doesn't have good relationships with, countries where the US government sees people being a higher risk of overstaying their visa. Um, so if you are from one of those countries, it's not a bad idea to be prepared with documentation that establish your ties to your home country, such as the ones that were listed in this question. If you own a home, bring your lease. If you have family, be ready to talk about your family. If you have you have a tour in Europe, a month after your US tour, bring documentation to show that you have ongoing professional obligations outside the US. With the important caveat, the consular officers don't like you to walk up to the window and hand them a pile of documentation without being asked. What's most important is to be able to verbally describe your ties to your home country, to answer questions with specificity and confidence. And then you can have those materials in your back pocket in case they say, prove it. You know what I mean? And then you can show stuff if you're asked. It's not a bad idea to have that with you in case you're asked, but don't lead with that.
Mhm.
Um, whether or not we're seeing an increase in that sort of scrutiny these days, maybe here and there. It's sort of like I think they're individual officers. Same with, Customs and Border Protection. I think they're individual consular officers who feel emboldened to be, highly scrutinizing applications because of the anti-immigration position of the administration in general. But I don't know that we're seeing a significant pattern of people being denied on that basis, and especially not people from global majority countries. And frankly, if you're a white person from Western Europe, you probably don't have much to worry about in that regard, if you know what I mean. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
unfortunately, you know what I mean.
um, okay, another question about documentation to bring, probably our last question for the day, but uh okay. In addition to the notice of approval, the I-797 approval notice, are consulates now requiring to see a copy of the I-129 as well?
Not across the board. And when you say the I-129, you mean the petition, the whole petition that was filed with USCIS here in the US. There are certain posts that sometimes ask for it. I think Tokyo is one, but it's not required across the board. It shouldn't be. They can access that documentation in their computer system at the consulate. So, um, yeah, but it is specific and it's sort of always changing. There's, periodically we hear from three clients in Tokyo, for example, like, hey, I went to my interview, I had my approval notice, but they asked to see a copy of the petition. Now they're telling me to email it. That comes and goes. So I recommend checking with someone like us before you go to your interview to see if that would be necessary. They should give you a list of documentation that you're supposed to bring. If they want you to bring the full I-129, hopefully they tell you to do so. Um, that's yeah. I want to quickly answer this final question. My P1 visas are valid until March 2026. Should I be concerned about entering the country in January 2026? No, as long as you are going to be leaving before your visa expires. You are allowed to enter the country up until the day your visa expires, as long as you intend to leave when it expires. Matthew.
We had a question just submitted here, and I would say we probably don't have time to answer this, but to the person who submitted it, please reach out to us. It has to do with a denial that looks pretty strange. So yeah, for the person who just submitted that question about the stage manager, please send that to us and we can talk about what happened there. We're coming up on the hour here. I want to thank everybody for coming and for tuning in. Again, we will be doing this monthly, so watch your social media and your email for the topic of the next one. That will be coming out shortly. Will, thank you so much for your time. And Lee, also thank you so much for your expertise and perspective on all of these matters. This isn't an easy topic to talk about. And I really appreciate both of your candor and the depth of your knowledge. So thank you both for all you've contributed to this conversation today. And thank you all. And that should wrap it up. Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Bye, y'all.